Listen, Josh, I got a gift for you.
Okay. I don't know what to say.
Don't know what to say. Try it on. Look at that. Beautiful. You know how powerful I just made you?
Wow, thank you.
There's only 3 people in the world who got a ring like that. And you're the only one who's Come here. Listen. We gotta talk about your guy. It's obscene what he's doing. You gotta tell him. It is what it is.
What it is?
What it is. He can suck off a president, but he can't be sucking on his ring pop like that, okay? It's obscene. You gotta talk to him.
Me? Look how happy he is.
This comes from high up, okay?
From high up?
From high up.
He doesn't talk about women when he's on his ring. He doesn't talk about anything else.
Look at him.
Okay, I'll talk to him. But you know I talk to him. He's the only one I can talk to, but he just keeps sucking on the ring. I don't know what to do.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
What it is.
What it is.
What it is. Hello, welcome to episode 7,409 million.
This is Captain Logs, 7,405 million.
I'm not sure you're even listening anymore, Space Command. But here we go again.
We're sending a transmission out there, hoping someone will hear this.
Ground control.
Is this a Star Wars reference?
No.
Oh.
This is an Ad Astra reference.
Oh, okay.
Which is a deep cut.
That's
'cause
actually just how I feel all the time.
Release that episode.
Oh, we saw Ad Astra.
We did.
Oh yeah,
Interesting.
That one was definitely, that episode was sent out to the stars.
I sent it out to the stars on my own.
We're waiting to get a ping back.
By stars, I mean I deleted it entirely.
It's actually on its way to Jupiter.
It's
So
absolutely.
it'll get there in
to Europa, actually.
34 years will get it.
I'm Addison,
Jackson.
Josh.
and we're doing
great.
something.
What
We're doing something pretty unprecedented tonight. We have watched 2 films. We're going to discuss 2 films instead of our 1. So buckle in, get ready for a 2-hour episode of TV Honor. So we watched The Irishman by Martin Scorsese. And we watched Matty Peter?
Mati Pure.
Matty Pierre.
I think so.
The directorial debut of Matty Pierre, Atlantics. I say we start with Atlantics.
I'm having deja vu.
I feel like I'm being gaslit right now. I don't know what to feel. Boys, what do you think?
Well, I guess we should give some background here. So I was kind of hoping that Atlantics was going to be another kind of foreign language hit like Parasite was.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely had the marketing for it.
It had the marketing for it. It had a really strong pedigree as far as reviews are concerned. and they were like a sci-fi movie that's like a rom-com sort of, and I was like, what an interesting
Oh wow,
blend.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear the rom-com part. I heard the sci-fi stuff.
Yeah, and so I thought, that'd be a fun thing to watch. And we watched it, and I found it to be mostly baffling. I have heard though that there are some
No, don't. You're being a dick now.
some parallel between this
Wow.
film and Toni Morrison's Beloved. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
I would love to tell the audience that we had a previous take of this episode
Addison's being exposed right now.
in which Addison just completely undermined me. And I know it's fun to make fun of Josh in his long explanations, and I understand why. It's fair. Jackson, what do you think of the movie?
Well, so I kind of had, I feel like I had misconstrued expectations for this movie because the description was that it's like set in the near future, and it's a sci-fi romantic movie, and so I was kind of in my mind just imagining kind of like a Black Mirror type plot.
Me too, and especially in the beginning when they're building that huge skyscraper, I was
Right.
like, oh, that's got to play like a huge part in this story.
Right, and it is kind of like Parasite, where you have the architecture kind of tells a story of class struggle, where you have these poor laborers who are shortchanged on they're not being paid by the guy who's building these giant skyscrapers, and so it does the architecture tells a story of class struggle in the society, like Parasite did.
Yeah, it's monolithic. It's the Tower of Babel, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like this huge thing that you can't reach, not only as a character in the film, but also as an audience. You don't get a clear visual of it. It's kind of encased in fog and all that. Mm-hmm. I thought that was the sci-fi element, or the futuristic element. It's very much like a literature future. It's not a like spaceships flying around and everyone has Apple Watches, but no one has like a real like grasp on a new technology. It's kind of just like ingrained in how we behave, person to person.
A world with everyone wearing Apple Watches is the future that I want for me and my children.
It's here today.
I mean, I guess it's the future we live in. I mean, like,
Right.
I don't know how it is in Senegal, but like Dubai, you have like all these like laborers being driven in to
Yeah.
build these massive buildings.
Not even, you don't have to go so
Basically slave
far.
labor.
Vegas is like another example of just massive construction, and like you can go to Vegas and make like $150 an hour being a laborer. Like you go to school, you go to like vocational school, and there's all these just like different areas in the world where just like these massive things are being like piled up, and it kind of feels like, I don't know, not futuristic, but just like disconnected from what we are trying to achieve. And I think the same thing is happening in the movie, where it's like people are living these normal lives, and then also there's this huge, massive, giant penis-like chode building in the distance, which I thought was kind of funny.
It's important to note, however, just real quick, that if you're working in Vegas and you're making $150 an hour, you're only going to make that until Trump declares bankruptcy.
That's absolutely right.
And,
And the businesses around it will collapse.
Yes.
Yes.
So just a little,
So it's
clear up
it's
for the
a
audience.
theoretical $150 an hour.
It is.
I'll
And
pay you in
metaphorical.
3 months.
So I thought like there was some interesting camera work here. Like for example, when the girl gets married and she goes into her room for the first time with her friends, and everything in there is stark white, and with their dark skin, they just like stand out against that white backdrop. Right?
Some good visuals in that.
Yeah, like just symbolizing the fact that they're so out of place in this upper class world that they've suddenly found themselves in. Like there was some studied cinematic techniques here, but I never felt as though they cohered into something like meaningful or
Like they were really driven by a plot, maybe.
yeah. And I mean, my God,
My God.
the
My God.
exterior
As a black
shots.
man.
And like the lingering camera on, and I get it that they're trying to make Senegal and the ocean like a character in this movie.
Sure.
Like that's very much, I felt like the intent of having all of these long just exterior shots where nothing is happening. Nothing. long stretches of the movie. And that's where it kind of lost me, where I wasn't positive that this was being done for an artistic reason, or if they were trying to like make it seem more artistic.
Yeah, I think this movie runs
Hour 45.
oh, it's an hour 45. Okay,
Yeah.
I was thinking 90 minutes, but this movie is 42 minutes to me. I think it gets to the exact moment where, or the minute where a film is constituted as an actual film. It went to Cannes. It did really well. It
feels like a short film.
Well, 42 minutes is the length that is required to be for full length film.
That's a full feature.
Yeah, 42 or 43, depending on which festival or whatever. I think it was like 40 minutes, and then they said, you need to have something else.
They're like, make it a long movie.
So they said, have longer shots of the ocean.
Okay.
And I think that was like, a lot of it felt very much like you were going to a festival and you were watching a movie that had a lot of potential but wasn't quite there yet. And I think this movie is still in that phase of not being all the way realized. Yeah,
what I will say is that I would absolutely at least attempt to watch the follow-up. Whatever Mati?
I think it's Mati's definitely the first name. I don't know the last name.
Whatever Mati follows this up with, I'll give it a shot, because I did see potential in this movie. It just wasn't quite all the way there.
An interesting side note that I just thought about is that all the other workers who died out at sea, they come back and possess seemingly their significant other. Right. Haunt this builder.
Right.
Except the main character's lover who went out and died. He comes back and haunts or he possesses another man so he can still bang his ex-lover.
He still gets it in. Well, the whole point of the whole point of that stuff, I think, was that
so he could bang her.
Right. Well, initially you think, oh, it's a symbolism for how they want their lovers to actually come back instead of just going off into Europe and finding a better life. But in reality, they're just like, they're just dead at sea.
I didn't pick up the migrant part of it because
I don't think they're migrants. I think they are just simply, this isn't working out. They're not fleeing. Well, I guess like, migrants, but they're not fleeing as like refugees.
Like, they just got fucked up and wanted to go out on the boat or something.
No, I think it's that like they were getting stiffed by this guy who the women then go to visit when their like eyeballs are back in their head.
Yeah,
eyeball.
It was actually like a weird milky contact, which was neat. That was like a neat visual thing. And when they weren't getting paid, they're like, "Fuck this, we're going off to find somewhere that will pay us right." And
I think the women that were left behind were kind of twisting their narrative into thinking that like they left to like find a better life so that they can either bring them with them or come back with riches.
They ain't coming back. Right,
and they're not coming back, and so they created this story that they've died at sea and that they're being haunted by their ghosts. And I think that becomes a more magic realism. And I think that's where people kind of pulled that and put it into like their reviews and stuff.
I feel like
it takes work. I don't think that's a movie that really just says like, this is a magic realism story where the initial shift into realism to non-realism happens. There's none of that. It kind of just like is just happening as it unfolds, and it's kind of hard to discern.
I think that's interesting. Yeah, there was not a shift. I feel like the magical realism thing that people are talking about might be kind of wishful thinking.
A little, well, yeah, I think the movie doesn't like push itself to it. It like wants it to be that, but it just doesn't like go far enough into me thinking like, oh, this isn't actually happening.
Yeah.
Which is like confusing.
So I would genuinely like to hear.
I don't want to explain it.
No, I'd love to hear it. So you liked this movie because it reminded you of the book, because you said it put you in the position of like the main character.
And it put me in a position. I just remember reading Beloved for the first time and being thoroughly confused, and then rereading it and having a much more profound understanding. And I felt I don't want to compare the two because I think Beloved is a much better representation of like post-slavery trauma. And this movie is something that is projecting something different but similar. I just felt like there's something deeper there. And the first time I read Beloved, I felt that way too. I just didn't know what, and then I had to reread it and kind of work my way into understanding what it was.
Do you think this movie would improve or richen with a second viewing?
I think you'd have to cheat a little bit. I think you have to read some stuff and read what other people think. I haven't read anything about it yet. I haven't seen a trailer. I only read like the headlines with sci-fi, whatever, magic realism going into it. Even though I did fall asleep, as you've noted.
You were possessed.
I was possessed, right, by my lover who
by
left
your
me.
Sleepy lover.
Yes, Toni Morrison. Read Beloved, be confused by it, and then also be sickened by it once you realize what it is about, and then watch the Ant-Lantics. Ant-Man Lantics, starring Paul Rudd and Mati Diop.
Mati Diop.
I don't know her last name.
I personally would not recommend this film.
Okay.
I do think that potentially there's an audience who might enjoy it, but it's too slow. It's too slow. I can't fully recommend it, and it doesn't have a big payoff. It doesn't lead to where you might want it to go in order to make everything kind of worth it and pop. How about you, Josh?
You mean me?
You mean Jackson? I already said what I thought.
You didn't recommend it though.
Oh, I would recommend it.
You would? Okay.
I think any foreign language film should be recommended.
Fair enough.
I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, if you want to watch a foreign film, yes. Maybe it's a good way to kind of pass the time that way, but it's really thin. Like the plot is almost like not there, and also
I would say there's almost no plot.
No plot. It's there's some like compelling acting, I think, in some parts of it, but if you're just like flipping through Netflix looking for a movie to watch, I think it's overrated.
I agree.
Oh my god, you've segued amazingly into the next film we're going to talk about. Or maybe not.
I know you read a lot of things about me. I just want to say I'm sorry. I know I wasn't a good dad. I know that. I was just trying to protect all of yous.
From what?
You didn't see what I see, what I've been through.
The long-awaited continuation of Martin Scorsese's Gangland trilogy. Dang it. The Irishman.
So what were the first two movies?
I thought you were going to say the sequel to Shutter Island.
The first two movies were Goodfellas and Casino.
And then Casino, yeah.
Okay.
And this is his third in his series of mob films that basically serve to show us how the mob has had enormous influence on American culture and American politics from about the 1950s on.
Mm-hmm.
And of the three, this is the weakest one.
Oh, you're giving out your opinion already.
I was just going to throw that out there. Between Goodfellas, Casino...
Oh, well, yeah. If you're going to compare those two,
and
yeah, of course.
The Irishman, well, that's what we're talking
Why
about.
isn't The Departed included in that?
Because that's Boston crime. That's Irish
different.
crime. That's not Italian.
Not to confuse
mafia crime.
The Irishman.
So there's a rich history.
I've went back to my homeland in the Ireland, and I studied Philadelphia crime, and I've learned ring pups. I've learned them. Okay, sorry.
I learned
the ring pups.
So,
It's racist that you just an Irish accent. I'd like to put that on the record.
I'm Irish, so fuck you.
Fuck you indeed, man.
Hey, you racist
Well, we're
prick.
all Africans.
This cocksucker wants to be he wants to... Okay. Wow. You watch Atlantics once and you think you're African.
Senegalese, okay.
I have to say that was
Senegalese.
the best
You
response
say
I could have
Senegalese.
made to that statement.
That's pretty good. Good for you.
Lala?
You want to be a part of this fight? A part of this history?
Whatever you need me to do, I'm available.
What did you say? It's the weakest one?
I do. I think it's the weakest one. That doesn't mean I hated it. But between Goodfellas, Casino, and this one, this is definitely the lesser of the three. And there's many reasons for that we will eventually get into.
Start the timer.
Go ahead and start the timer.
All right, we're good to go.
But overall, I liked this movie.
Okay.
Didn't love it.
You can leave.
Didn't think it was amazing.
Jackson, you and I will talk.
But I liked it. And I will clarify that statement later, but I'd love to hear what you guys thought.
Well, I agree. I liked it, didn't love it. Just to kind of earn my check on one opinion here, I thought the plot was pretty thin. I didn't think it was a 3.5 hour plot.
Yeah.
I thought the acting was phenomenal, especially Joe Pesci. He was my favorite. I thought that
Welcome back, Joe Pesci.
he was able to
Coming out of retirement.
The seemingly kind of simple character. Like in real life, I think this character was probably a pretty just basic mob boss. But the way that he portrayed this character, it seemed like there's layers to him. Like he had the kind of his soft spot. He was just a friendly guy. Like he meets the Irishman, Robert De Niro's character, just by helping him fix his car. He doesn't owe him anything.
His legal name is the Irishman, right?
Sharan?
Frank Sheeran.
Sharon.
I
Sharona.
agree with you. I wanted to just pose a real quick question to you too.
Right before Josh gets
Before
Josh
Josh gets to his thing about what he thought of the movie, do you think that Joe Pesci's performance is so remarkable in this film because he's not a raging lunatic? Do you think
because he's a controlled person
because he's a controlled, quiet person? Like, are we just celebrating the fact that Joe Pesci was able to rein in his
I think that's absolutely what we're
wild
doing.
tendencies that he displayed in Goodfellas and Casino? Go get your fucking shine box.
I think just beyond that, it's just good acting. Like I think he put layers on this character. Like I said, like in a 3.5 hour movie, I think Robert De Niro kind of fails in putting layers to his character. Which I mean, maybe the character doesn't lend itself to kind of finding depth because he's kind of like a very just he's a yes man to the mob.
Yes,
that's where he finds his niche. Is basically they're like there's the scene where he's just tossing guns off the bridge because he's
oh my god, that's the auto
all these people
the digital re-aging of his face, and then also his physically frailed body just
with his shoulders, which are like up to his fucking earlobes at this point.
He physically can't throw a gun into the river, and yet Martin Scorsese's like, okay, can you just please try?
Like they have cables on him to help him through.
They fucking crank him up so his arms just catapult out.
Whereas normally, it's like in Marvel movies, the cables are attached to the actors. And they're like, "Whoa, Thanos!" And it's just the guns.
Just the guns. That's the only time. That was like $100 million of the $300 million budget.
At least.
That was so funny.
All right, action.
Well, Jackson is...
God damn it. I just imagined the door opening and
oh, why he's crying.
We got him.
And the gun just getting yanked out of the car.
Like he doesn't even get out of the car.
And he's just sleeping in the car.
Because he's so arthritic.
Yeah, the door flies open as well, and his legs fly open.
Shotgun.
He's just like sleeping in the car. And the gun flying out of his lap over the bridge.
Joshua, what did you think of The Irishman?
I'm gonna wait for Jackson.
No, I'm good. I'm being
wow. I've never seen Jackson display so much emotion. No, I want this from you more. Bring it on. The Irishman.
Yep.
Luke Cage, Netflix series original, Marvel Luke Cage. I love Martin Scorsese.
So do I.
I think he's an amazing filmmaker, and much like we talked about, we did Jaws.
Which was also directed by Martin Scorsese.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Produced, written, directed. The original novel was written by Martin Scorsese. The mob produced it.
The guns go.
They went into that.
It's all food for Jaws.
That license plate that came out of the stomach of the shark was really.
That was Jimmy Hoffa's fucking license plate.
When he was driving that car, he was sitting in the car. They're like, "We'll pick up your car."
Shit.
What an amazing callback! I love that.
That's great.
Like I said, like Steven Spielberg, he's an amazing filmmaker, and I respect his work, and I love the way that he kind of presents a potential for film. Addison's yawning.
No, I'm having anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah.
That being said, Martin Scorsese can make a stinker when he wants to.
Controversial opinion.
Now, I know this is a controversial opinion because the movies that I'm going to use as examples, I don't think are necessarily agreed upon. He's only had 2 bad movies, in my opinion, Scorsese. One is Shutter Island, which I think is generally like not great. The other one is Wolf of Wall Street, which I think I don't think anyone really agrees on whether it's good or bad. I think a lot of people like it, a lot of people don't like it. It's mixed. This is the third movie in which he's made a movie that I don't think really lives up to who he is as a filmmaker. And everyone nitpicks and says like, all the film nerds are like, oh, 3.5 hours, this is great cinema, this is what movies should be. And everyone's picking out their parts for what makes this movie good, but they don't think it's a good movie in its entirety. And I don't think that qualifies it as a good movie. So I don't think it's a good movie.
I do think that this movie has gotten quite a few passes for the fact that it's gotten the band back together, so to speak, and that we have...
It's a good story.
We've got Joe Pesci, we've got Robert De Niro, we've got Al Pacino, who actually previously really hasn't been in a lot of Martin Scorsese movies. And then, of course, we've got Marty himself. And we're...
We'll digitally
de-burp
deburp that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like an outer narrative that is really playing into the movie, and Joe Pesci's out of retirement, Robert De Niro's being digitally de-aged, and then it's just a lot of like...
Would you say that this movie wasn't made for a generation? Is it kind of for the older audience that's like, hey, the big hitters are back, and they're using this new technology to...
Bada bing, bada boom. Like.
That's interesting. I have been spending a lot of time in libraries lately, and there's a lot of old people in libraries. And everyone's talking about this movie, including old people in libraries. And the consensus around old people is that they do not like this movie. From like the 6 that I talked to.
Like what's
they think it's too violent. They don't really care about the movie.
It's really not that violent. Like there's violence in it.
Bursts of violence, like every other Marty movie.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. It's not gratuitous in any sort of way, but I don't think anyone's coming out of this saying like, "Wow, that was a masterpiece." That was like The Searchers or something like that.
If you go on the Metacritic page, it is a full page of 100s before you get to like the 90s and 80s.
Which is so interesting because Martin Scorsese notoriously is anti-Hollywood, and he is one of the few directors that's like in Hollywood that's like, hates Hollywood, and he's spent all these movies like kind of criticizing it, and like Raging Bull is a great example. And now he's like
masterpiece though. Raging Bull.
Raging Bull's great, but it's also a movie that's like, oh, you didn't want to give me the Oscar? Well, then fuck you. Here's this movie that's in black and white, and no one's making movies in black and white anymore. This whole thing, and now he's like in the industry, and so much it's like so obvious that he's like a Hollywood plant now, essentially.
Oh, I wouldn't say he's a plant.
So
I don't know.
I think that it's an astute question as far as, is this for our generation? No, because I don't think that many of us care about American politics in the 50s and the 60s and how the mob maybe had influenced.
How familiar were you guys with the Hoffa story?
But that's the thing, the Jimmy...
I was relatively familiar.
Yeah,
But not familiar with the specifics of it by any means.
Of like his death specifically?
I just knew that his death was unsolved.
His disappearance, which also was this whole thing is disproven.
That's what it sounds
like.
Which
is
it's
really
like
weird.
Doubted.
Yeah.
They already debunked it before the movie even was a thing, and now they're making this whole like I don't understand what the point of this movie is essentially.
Yeah.
Going into it, I was like, what is it?
And so and then I had a question that I was going to ask. And then
Did I derail you?
I forgot it. I forgot what I was going to...
You said, is this movie for our generation? I don't know. For me, I'm interested in what Scorsese has to say. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily relate to it. I don't care about the Catholic stuff. I don't care about the Italian mobster stuff.
There's not a lot of Catholic stuff in this one.
That's what's really interesting. People said this is like the final piece of his Catholic like imagery, and I was like, where I don't get it.
I guess the only
people are just projecting what they want out of
is like that's why they accept the Irishman is because Irish are Catholic too. Like that's the bonding between the.
But then there's this whole under tension where it's like Jimmy Hoffa is like racist towards other people, and then there's like a weird tension between him, De Niro, and Hoffa, where it's just like I don't know. I just didn't feel as if like you would get like a whole like 5-second shot of just a cross or Jesus on the cross in a normal or Scorsese movie where it's just like we have to feel this certain way, and then in this movie I just didn't feel it at all. But then people were
have a pretty long shot of a marriage in a church.
You have to get the obligatory baptism and
Yeah.
marriage scene out of the way. That's
Get
like
your
every
sacraments. Yeah.
every mob Italian movie.
What do you guys think of Everybody Loves Raymond, the sequel, The Irishman?
You know, I thought he was all right. I thought he was pretty good for what it was.
I
took
don't
me-
care if he did it.
That took me out of it.
I don't care if he did it. I'll defend you.
You want to know if I did it?
You wanna know if I did? I also felt like De Niro, even though his face aged throughout the movie, he was the exact same tonally, like he presented himself in the exact same way throughout the movie.
There was no nuance in
Absolutely.
the performances. That was
Which
it
is like,
was-
why de-age him? Just make him be
Like
the
him,
same age.
Shuffling away from the car, just like, do I owe you anything?
Yeah, he's supposed to be like 39 years old. Like,
Right.
give him some spring.
And
Like,
he's just like, young man, you need some help?
where's the young man?
talking- you're talking-
progressing right
This
here.
man's blowing past 40 before our eyes.
I mean,
maybe that's just the reality of like Italian or Irish people. It's just
the digital de-aging is easy to pick on. It's obviously not perfect.
Yeah, I'm
What it
not-
led for me was that I had a really hard time knowing what fucking time frame we were in
Right.
watching this movie. Like,
I got lost a
are
little
we
bit,
10
yeah.
years ago? Are we 40 years ago? Where are we? Who knows? Who cares?
Well, who cares? And also, just like it's easy to pick on, but it's actually amazing how much effort went into it too. Like,
And
there's
money.
there's a scene where Al Pacino is in prison and he's eating his ice cream, and I guess there's like 6 cameras on him
Mm-hmm.
to do the digital de-aging, and he's like, "What camera do I look at?"
there's a si- there,
Camera do I look at?
I thought that I wasn't. I really had no intention. At first watching this movie, I really was like, okay, I'm gonna like it, and I was kind of disappointed by the fact that I'm gonna like this fucking movie. And I think 40 minutes in, I realized I'm not gonna like it. But then
Yeah,
I was like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. And then I was like, oh, but we still have 3 more hours to go. Wow,
I know, it's a
incredible.
really
We
long-ass
still have to
movie.
keep doing this.
The movie hits the beats of Marty movies pretty well, where you have like the voiceover narration, then you
Yeah.
have cutaways to like women in a giant laundromat, and like
Then you have
know,
arias. You have
Yeah.
people singing arias while other deals are going down. And
like all the looks are there, all the tropes, if you will, of Marty are there. It just they ring sort of hollow.
It's like your husband of 40 years has maybe gotten a promotion at a job. He gets a little worked up, drinks some gin.
Mm-hmm.
And he's putting the moves on you. He's really like, he's feeling you up. He's dancing with you, takes you on the floor, brings you back home. And then he tries to stick it inside of you and he's not hard. And it's like, man, everything's there except
we've all been there.
for that penis.
Yeah.
Martin Scorsese is that 80-year-old man who just can't get it up anymore, but knows how to work you into the mood and then disappoint you.
You know how strong I made you?
I know things they don't know I know.
He said that? You sure he said that?
Well, on that note, I feel like one of the big themes of this movie is getting old and looking back on your life.
That's absolutely right, Jackson.
Yeah.
Can you
Which-
explain more about
Well,
this?
so you have an almost 80-year-old filmmaker, and a lot of these actors are pushing 80 as well. And the opening scene of this movie isn't like some big mob hit. It's the main character in a nursing home, shriveled up, saying, "I was working stiff once a time, and then I started to paint houses," and this is basically like it cuts back and forth between him
It's the outer frame of a movie.
looking back on his life and how he got to the point where you get the final scenes, spoilers, is him, basically alone in a nursing home.
Well, you just called a spoiler.
I called spoilers.
He did.
I did.
He
All right.
called it. He
All
just
right.
took it. He didn't even ask. He just took it.
Spoilers. Spoilers. Spoilers.
Spoilers, 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 spoilers.
I think we're far
Like
enough.
Sharon.
You worked hard for it. Go for
And
it.
he's just alone.
Yeah.
Still, he did everything. Like he said he did what he did. He got his rewards. He crossed all these lines, and he's still alone in the nursing home.
Yeah, he succeeded essentially. He didn't get caught. He paid his dues and he didn't betray anybody.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's not necessarily true, but he essentially did what like the mobster oath is just to do your part and then don't get caught.
Well, he didn't get killed, in the process of doing his job, and he didn't go to prison and die.
But he lost his family, basically.
He lost everything in the process.
Yeah.
The last 30 minutes of this movie are the best 30 minutes of this movie, hands down. In terms of, I felt like they were the most meaningful and the most impactful of the whole film.
Wait, what's the 30-minute mark for you?
The mark for
I can't
me
quite remember.
is basically when it transitions fully into...
When Joe Pesci dies.
After Joe Pesci dies, then it transitions to
The
Robert.
bocce game?
Yeah. Yeah,
Or
the bocce game, and then they eat the bread, and they do the last sacrament, essentially, before Joe Pesci dies.
Okay.
And then...
So after Jimmy Hoffa's been killed.
Robert De Niro's in the nursing home, and it comprises basically him, like, going and begging forgiveness from his daughters. They don't forgive him.
Oh, man.
And then the
that
priest...
was such a sad scene when he's in the bank, just, like, hobbling up to the...
That was a really good reveal, and I thought, yeah, a well-directed scene.
It was good. It was good. And then when he's talking to the priest, and the priest is like, you really don't regret anything of your life? Like, nothing? No.
Oh, and then that scene where the FBI comes, and they're like...
I love that scene.
And they, like, say, like, hey, man, what do you have to lose? Like, everyone's dead. What do you mean your lawyer is, like, gonna... Who told you?
They kind of, like, bring that out is actually really funny, because Robert De Niro is like, I'm sorry, I'll have to, refer all other questions to my lawyer, and you're like... He's dead. Your lawyer's dead. He's like,
who killed him?
He's dead?
No, yeah. His question was who killed him?
Oh, yeah, he did.
Which is a really... it's intentional.
Or who got him or something.
Yeah, to that effect where it's like, the game is still in his head where it's like, you didn't just die. Like, things don't just happen naturally. Like, someone killed you on purpose for another
the
piece.
blurbs they put under each character earlier on the film. It's just like shot 3 times in the head.
Yeah,
in 1979 in
The
Miami.
point being that everyone in this story dies violently for the most part, except for Frank Sheeran, arguably the character who deserves it the most.
He's like a war veteran who's going through like this traumatic processing where he never really quite gets to the end of it, and he just kind of is just left alone. Yeah, I thought those were really interesting moments. I don't know if we needed 2 hours and 45 minutes to get to it, though.
No, I completely agree, because the Hoffa story was not interesting enough to carry it all along.
Especially when you're going back and forth. When you have De Niro just saying, like, hey, they told me that you got to stop doing this. Tell them I don't want to stop doing this. Hey, hard cut.
Seriously.
Oh, he said he doesn't want to stop doing this. Tell him to stop doing it.
I'm not going to talk to the little guy, Frank. Don't make me do it.
Just back and forth.
You gotta talk to the little guy. You gotta talk to the little guy, Jimmy.
Well, he did show up 15 minutes late in shorts.
He did.
I didn't show up 15 minutes late. I showed up 9 minutes late.
That character was one of the best ones.
Yeah, you kind of actually wanted to like him.
Yeah.
Joey Pro.
That actually helps you turn against Hoffa, is that character kind of just being like a good old boy, and Hoffa being like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Well, he's like, Hoffa's just creating problems because he's bitter or stubborn or whatever it is. And then Joey Pro's like also problematic, but like, come on. And De Niro's like the character where you're like, come on, man, just make amends. Like, you're gonna become president as long as you just fucking make amends with this guy. Like, it doesn't matter.
He's asking for his blessing.
Yeah, and it's just like, come on. And so there's like, I don't know, but that's just so fucking pointless to me to like have to be in the shoes of this character who is just going back and forth trying to make these amends.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I think that the actual historical story here is not, there's not enough there for a 3.5 hour movie. Maybe not even an hour and a half movie.
I think this movie is 2 hours long.
There's enough for an hour and a half for a feature length. I thought that they did a good job
Maybe
of building.
Maybe if it's written a different way, but
you could take an hour out of this movie and I wouldn't have
easily. You could lose like a good chunk of this movie and it wouldn't affect the story whatsoever, because I did feel like they built pretty good tension leading up to Jimmy dying, as far as like Joe Pesci was like, you got to go to Detroit, and then there's the whole scene, the fish scene in the car where he's like, where'd you go, you just walk into the store and he said, give me a fish. What kind of fish did you get? That was one of the few scenes where I was like, oh, okay, here we are. This is classic Marty. We've got like a good kind of like absurd conversation going on. There's a lot of tension hanging in the air.
But it also just felt like you're spending too much time in the context of the movie. You shouldn't have that scene. You should only have that when you're going really, really fast, and then you want to slow it down to have the tension.
Sure.
But you have slow, more slow, It doesn't really like break it up enough. So it's like you need to take that out.
I agree, but I did think that
I did like it.
particular
Yeah,
scene was well done.
Sure.
And then I also thought it was well done when they finally get Hoffa Pacino to the house, and he walks in there, and it's just the point of view shot of the empty house.
Silent shot. Yeah.
Silent. Hoffa realizes what's going on. He's like, "Come on, let's get out of here." And then Robert De Niro panics, and it's like, "Pat, pat."
It's kind of like ugly.
It's ugly. It's rushed.
Emotional.
It's like emotional.
Yeah, it's emotional. Yeah.
It was one of the few times where like the movie really made me feel for the characters and what was going on, and then it had a really good follow up with the only scene of dialogue that Anna Paquin has, which is when they're watching the news and she's like, "Have you called Joe yet?" And Robert De Niro's like, "No, I ain't called him. I ain't called him."
You did a lot more competently. He's like,
and which I don't know if you have any commentary on the controversy as far as.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you guys too.
I just read about it like today. Martin Scorsese's kind of defending that.
I think that
he's pushing back.
That it is defendable, and that if the story is okay. Is that if this is story is told from Frank's point of view, it would make sense because he was so involved in his work and what he was doing that she was essentially a voiceless figure in his life until this relatively pivotal moment where he had made this important decision to murder his friend, and it essentially cost him everything. It would make sense if the only time he ever heard her in his life was in this particular
when he was
scene.
most vulnerable and most exposed.
Yeah.
Not only as someone who could potentially be thrown in prison, but as someone who betrayed his friend who put him in a position of power and really brought him up.
Yeah.
No, I don't have any problem with... I didn't even give a shit about her character because I don't think her character was that good, and I don't even know why she was there.
Well, I think
it's not a feminist issue, though. That's what I wanted to get out. I don't think this is a feminist issue, and I don't think it should be presented as such.
It's not like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it's actually like if that criticism misunderstands that character because, like you said, she's kind of like this passive, observational character who, like, one of her first scene is her dad, dragging her to the grocery store to beat the shit out of the guy who pushed her, and she's just watching this guy, her father, beat the crap out of this guy in the middle of the street, and it kind of follows her, like, watching her dad join the mob, and then she has Hoffa come in, who's this like soft character who buys her ice cream, and then he dies, and that's when she finally speaks up.
You want an ice cream?
You know what I didn't like about her character though was that she kept having like these telepathic like moments where she understood what he had done, but like there was nothing.
Kids are like that.
Well, and I think the point is
but then as she got older, it just it didn't really. But
he thought he was hiding it well from her, but she was fucking onto him, and she knew it.
But then we know it too. If we're from his perspective,
we're the fucking audience. We're afraid,
right? But we're seeing him notice that she knows.
That's why it's important that's the first scene that she speaks, is because that's the first time he really hears her. If we're watching the movie from her perspective, he has thought up to this point that he has operated with impunity. He's above the law. He's never been caught. He's above the mob. He's a made man. Well, what he's not above is his family's observational skills.
I don't know. You just have like 3 shots where it's just her staring at him. I don't think that's enough. I just don't. In a 3.5 hour movie, I don't think you get enough out of it.
I'm not arguing that this movie should be 3.5 hours
I agree.
long.
I agree with what you're saying. I just think like you need more from that. There needs to be more substance to it, and you need to. If you're gonna get into her mindset, you need to step away from him as well.
One thing I want to get out of the way real quick.
Yeah, get it out
before we get into it. Another reason why I really liked the ending to this movie is the scene where he's talking to his other daughter, not Anna Paquin, and he's like, "I just want to talk to her. I just want to like make amends." And she's like, "You do realize that like we could never come to you for anything because we never knew how you were going to react to it, and like we were scared all the time." And I think that that's a really interesting contrast to like the scene in Goodfellas when Ray Liotta's wife, who was the psychologist in Sopranos, not Edie Falco, that's Tony Soprano's wife. What's her name? When Ray Liotta goes to like defend her honor and like beats the shit out of the guy with the gun, and then he hands it to her and she's all excited and she's like, "I know I shouldn't have been excited, but I was." I thought it was an interesting perspective shift to see how those kinds of actions could actually make someone really scared and feel insecure. And
instead of empowered and or whatever.
Instead of empowered, and yes, exactly. And so in the last 30 minutes of this movie, there were crammed so many more ideas than in the other 3 hours and 15 minutes of it.
Right. Well, it's the reckoning, essentially. It's like everything you've done has come back to you, and
which is something that these types of movies rarely examine.
Yeah.
And that's why it was good and I liked it.
I think just like having the framing device of him being in the home, and then you kind of work your way into the story, and you kind of forget that the person narrating is the person in the home until the brief moments where you cut back to him sitting in that chair or whatever. And I don't know who he's being interviewed by, if it's a documentary crew. I thought it was the FBI maybe, but I don't know who it was. You're kind of lost in that. And then you eventually come back to it. I think it just was a little too thin, essentially.
Yeah.
I like the ending, and I like that it was like a kind of gray of look at how people just don't necessarily have some sort of like heroic death or whatever from their mob escapades. But I just thought, I don't know.
Would you recommend it?
I just don't think it was good enough. Would I recommend it? No. Good God. 3.5 hours. Listen, you can't make me recommend a 3.5 hour movie. Lord of the Rings was 3 hours, and that's too long.
I think that if you're in the mood for a 3.5 hour movie, which I do find myself in those moods sometimes. Like if you have like the whole day ahead of you and you have nothing to do, but you want to just sit down and watch a movie, this movie is it's made by a master of his craft. You know, there's some very good scenes in here. There's a lot of good acting. So yeah, I think it's worth watching. Is it overrated? Yes, which is the theme of this episode.
What's the rating on it?
Oh man,
90-4.
Yeah.
Jackson, can I call you out for a sec?
Yeah. Oh, was that a commentary on?
You were watching this movie, I think, yesterday. You were texting while watching it.
That was my second time watching it, though.
Oh, your second full time watching it. Okay. I just wanted to make a comment on how you can easily just text through half this movie and still get it.
Oh,
that was gonna be my ultimate conclusion.
Could I have been on my phone the first time and gotten it? Sure. Yes. I mean, there's definitely some scenes that are so fucking thin that, like you said, you could cut them and it would be the same movie. So
I was watching it like this, expecting just masterpiece, and then I started just doing this.
And that's really, honestly, that's almost a commentary on films and critics, is that they can just be overrated and it just ruins it. Like, this would probably, maybe I would enjoy this movie a lot more if it wasn't at 95%.
I didn't know. I just knew Scorsese and I knew Pesci was coming back, and I thought this has to be a reason.
There's a lot of great things about this movie. It's just, it's far from perfect.
Yeah.
They didn't cut anything.
I remembered
Addison.
I remembered the question that I was going to ask, and I'm just going to use it as part of my my recommend. I would recommend this movie if you are a fan of Scorsese, because I think there's enough that you're not going to watch this and be like, what a waste of time. I wanted to pose a question to you, which is, do you think that this would be more effective if it was a miniseries? If it was broken up into, let's say, 3 episodes.
That's what everyone's talking about.
With a defined beginning and a defined end, to where you could kind of watch it on your terms and spread it out. Do you think you'd have a more generous opinion of it as a result if that were the case?
I think the story would lend itself more to that, but I think that it wouldn't be a Scorsese project at that point.
Which is what I was going to say, is Scorsese is such a whore for the concept of
film,
cinema and film,
linear,
as evidenced recently by his comments about our beloved Marvel. As far as Marvel not being,
that's right. He says this, yeah.
And I think
he's not wrong.
He's not wrong in that respect, but I do think that he's being somewhat myopic in his concept of cinema, and that this could have been a good opportunity for him to perhaps redefine what television means, what film means, all of that.
Well, I opened this thing up talking about Spielberg.
Also, too, streaming services. Streaming services are an on.
Why is he on a
explored
streaming
frontier?
Why is he on a streaming service?
Also,
though?
he's
Mix it up.
he's digitally de-aging all his actors. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
He's doing all the things that Marvel did before him. He's putting his shit on Netflix, and he's using all this CGI to like recreate characters that you don't need De Niro. You can find somebody else. You can find your next De Niro, essentially.
Right.
You can have your own. You can create cinema in a way that you used to do, which is authentic. You would sit down and you would write scenes as you like direct them. Essentially, that's what he used to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, he may be still doing it, but it's just like you have this like energy to you, and now you're kind of copying to the Hollywood model.
The true irony of this film, if I may get it out of the way real quick.
Get it out.
Is that on this like incredible unexplored platform that he's making it on, he is adhering so strictly to the conventions that he grew up with that are out of fashion.
Since the 60s. Yeah.
like
Out of fashion.
What particularly?
Oh, it's a film. Like, it's got to be seen in its entirety. And it should have a theatrical run before it's on home video.
You gotta talk way faster if you're gonna be Scorsese. It's gotta be on the theatrical run. And then you have the theaters, and then you're gonna put it on Netflix.
I think that is perhaps the most interesting takeaway from this movie, is that it could have been something more had it not been so rigidly defined.
Well, I mean, like, in his defense, maybe the hardest part of trying new things is like switching mediums, because TV writing is a lot different than movie writing.
Not necessarily. Not in this day and age, in the golden age of television.
To do it right, I feel like it's a lot different. Like, to do this movie different, you have to, the flow of it would be completely different script.
He wouldn't be writing it if it was a TV show. Even if it was a miniseries, he wouldn't be writing it. He'd be producing it, and that's it. He wouldn't direct it. He wouldn't do anything other than just tell people what to do in each episode. There's no way that Scorsese's writing
television before, though.
He produced
Boardwalk Empire.
Did an episode of Boardwalk Empire. He also did Michael Jackson's Bad. He directed that music video. I looked that up on IMDb. I had no idea.
Complicit.
He's complicit.
He's
Spielberg,
a fucking pedophile.
Spielberg, who we talked about.
Talk about your Spielberg thing real quick. Yeah.
Again, just being an overall dick. Spielberg adapted to television. Who he did Band of Brothers. He did Pacific. Is that what the other one was? The HBO one.
Yeah.
He did his miniseries. He learned how to take a narrative and expand it. He may have wanted to do another Saving Private Ryan. Understood that you can't just you can't box those things in, and he experimented with it. And I think those two are really comparable in terms of what they've done to Hollywood and how they've impacted it. And then films essentially are like huge. I think Spielberg's a little bit bigger, but Scorsese's more of the film nerd person. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I guess talking about like this being as a miniseries, everyone was like pointing out like you can cut it at 47 minutes. That's one episode. You can cut it at 98 minutes, something like that. That's another episode, and then keep going. And then I watched it that way. I watched it the first 50 minutes, and then I watched another 90 minutes, and then I watched the last half or last ladder of it. And it made sense to me, but I don't think it made it any better though.
Do you think they'll say that this review should have been a miniseries?
That's another joke that people have been making about other reviews of this movie. The next 200-minute review.
Well,
wow, I've deflated my best friends are tired of me talking.
No, not at all. I think we're just tired. No, I agree that.
No, not at all.
Or I don't know if I agree.
I think this review. I think we
just cracked it open, but we're getting into it now.
We're getting that ribbon.
Yeah. You mean this one?
Yeah.
Oh, we're getting that must-see ribbon for this review.
This far,
I know,
for the ribbon jokes. Anyways,
no. It's an interesting parallel with Spielberg, but Spielberg's sensationalist style lends itself way more to serialized television than Scorsese's more like, I don't know, slow.
Classic.
He's an 80-year-old man. What do you want from him?
I don't know.
I think he's 73, 74.
I think
he's directing another movie.
He's as old as Bernie Sanders. I just want everyone to talk about that. Yeah, and he's also doing the miniseries. He's doing the series, the White Devil and what was it movie?
He was slated
Leo,
to do the Devil in the White City.
He's in the White Devil starring Jackson Hill.
White Devil starring Jackson.
No, Leonardo DiCaprio was doing that, right?
He was slated to star in it, I think, as H.H. Holmes because he's
right.
a fucking narcissist.
Yes, he plays a rich man. You guys are you're gonna start catching on to Leo.
Rich serial killer.
Leo DiCaprio's bullshit. You're gonna start catching on, and then when you guys come to me like, oh, you were so right, Josh. I'm gonna make you lick my feet.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like and subscribe.
Bye.
Please tell your friends. Please email us at 2bhouseCast@gmail.com.
We need to say that in the beginning when